She lies in the dark, eyes closed, breath quiet, face still. But inside her mind, something extraordinary is happening. She's not simply resting, she's grieving. Hours ago, she stood at a funeral. She held a hand that used to be warm. She whispered goodbye. And now finally, alone in her bed, she's fallen asleep. But her brain has not. Beneath the calm surface of her sleeping body, her mind is running a marathon through memories, sensations, echoes of words never said. Her heart may be broken, but her brain is not shutting down. It's opening up. In this silent world of sleep, her mind is doing something we've only recently begun to understand. Not numbing the pain, not suppressing it, not forgetting, but reorganizing it, making room for it, filing the sharp edges down just enough so that, eventually, they won't cut her every time she remembers. Why does the brain need sleep to let go? And what exactly is it letting go of? We've all heard the phrase, sleep on it, as if sleep is a kind of magic solvent that makes hard things easier, confusing things clearer, unbearable things bearable. But when it comes to grief, soul-deep grief, that advice feels almost cruel. Sleep doesn't bring people back. It doesn't rewind time. And yet, something shifts. You wake up, and the world is still broken. But maybe it doesn't feel quite as sharp as it did the night before. So what is sleep actually doing? What's going on in the quiet, electric theater of the sleeping brain? Modern neuroscience has an answer, and it's both surprising and profound. Sleep, especially REM sleep, is not rest. It's repair. It's not silence. It's emotional processing at full volume. During REM, the brain replays emotionally charged memories, particularly painful ones. But it doesn't just relive them, it edits them. It deactivates the raw chemical signatures that make them feel unbearable. It doesn't delete the memory, but it softens the sting. It takes the memory out of crisis mode. In this way, REM sleep acts like emotional surgery, precise, complex, and utterly necessary. It turns out that without sleep, grief doesn't move. It gets stuck. Memories become rigid. Emotions stay raw. The wound doesn't close, festers. But with sleep, the brain has a way to hold the pain without being crushed by it. To remember, but not relive. So maybe sleep on it isn't a platitude. Maybe it's the most biologically accurate advice we have, because sleep doesn't erase the past. It reshapes how we carry it. And maybe that's why, even after the worst day of your life, your body still craves rest. Not to escape it, to survive, because sleep is the reason we can cry. And then, someday, smile again. It began, as many great discoveries do, with an accident. In the early 1950s, a sleep researcher named Eugene Aserinsky was observing a young boy in a sleep lab, not expecting much, but then something strange happened. The child's eyes began to flicker wildly beneath closed lids. His body twitched. His face seemed animated, almost expressive, though he remained deeply asleep. It was unlike anything researchers had seen before. They called it rapid eye movement, REM sleep. At first, they thought it was merely the landscape of dreaming, the strange theater where imagination runs free, but they didn't yet understand what the brain was doing during these flickering episodes, or why they mattered so much. For years, REM sleep was considered an oddity, a byproduct of the dreaming mind with no clear purpose. Dreams, after all, had long been dismissed as psychological noise, random firings of neurons, meaningless imagery, the mind's static. But as neuroscience advanced, the picture began to change. Researchers started to notice something remarkable. REM wasn't chaotic. It was organized, specific, and deeply emotional, in fact. During REM sleep, the emotional centers of the brain, particularly the amygdala, the part responsible for processing fear, anxiety, and emotional salience, became hyperactive. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the brain's center of logic, judgment, and rational control essentially went offline. This wasn't just sleep. This was a complete shift in brain function. The rational mind steps aside. The emotional mind takes over. And what does it do with that power? It remembers, not randomly, but with eerie precision. During REM sleep, the brain reactivates memories, particularly the emotionally intense ones. But it doesn't just replay them. It reshapes them. It changes the emotional charge attached to them. The raw panic of a traumatic moment becomes, slowly, something more tolerable. The unbearable loss becomes bearable. In this altered brain state, the mind is not numbing our emotions, but processing them safely, internally. Through symbolic reconstruction and chemical modulation, modern sleep scientists, including figures like Matthew Walker, have begun to unravel just how essential REM sleep is to emotional resilience. In one breakthrough study, researchers found that participants who were allowed to sleep after an emotional experience remembered the event but rated it as significantly less distressing the next day. The memory remained intact, but its power to overwhelm had faded. In other words, the emotional brain did its job while the conscious self rested. But what happens when REM sleep is disrupted? The answer is harrowing. Patients with PTS, those haunted by war, violence, abuse, or profound loss often exhibit fragmented or absent REM sleep. Their dreams are not healing. They are tormenting. Their brains keep reactivating the memory but never resolve it. The emotional charge remains raw, untouched. Night after night, the trauma returns, unchanged. Without healthy REM sleep, the emotional brain cannot finish its work. The wound remains open. This has real urgent stakes for all of us. We often say, time heals. But neuroscience tells us, it's not time that heals, it's sleep. Sleep is not simply a passage of time. It's an active, biological process that enables emotional repair. And without it, we don't move forward. We remain suspended in the moment of pain, unable to integrate it into our life story. Think of grief. After losing someone we love, we enter a state of rupture. Our nervous system is overwhelmed. Our memories of them are sharp, visceral, painful. But over weeks and months, if we are sleeping, those memories begin to soften. We still feel the loss, but we are no longer drowned by it. We begin to remember without being traumatized. This is not forgetting. This is healing. Without sleep, we cannot let go. And without letting go, erasing, but releasing, we cannot keep living in a world grappling with trauma, burnout, and collective grief. The science of sleep is not just academic curiosity, it's survival. The way we sleep shapes the way we feel, remember, and recover. And understanding this process, how our brains use the dark hours to process the unbearable, may be one of the most profound insights of our time. In 2019, a landmark study changed the way we understand sleep and grief forever. Using advanced neuroimaging, researchers discovered that during REM sleep, the brain performs a delicate emotional surgery. It doesn't delete memories. It doesn't overwrite them. Instead, it replays emotionally charged events, sometimes in the form of dreams, but without the accompanying chemical flood of stress and pain. The memory remains, but the sting is gone. It's as if the brain is learning to hold the past more gently. This process is called emotional decoupling. The emotional charge is uncoupled from the factual memory, and it's not abstract. It's physical. Researchers observed that during REM, stress-related neurochemicals, like norepinephrine, drop dramatically. The brain is deliberately muting the volume on emotional pain while it revisits the scenes that caused it. It's a precise, biologically timed operation, a kind of overnight therapy built into our wiring. But what if that process is interrupted? What happens when someone doesn't get enough REM sleep, when the emotional brain doesn't get its chance to work through the pain? That question isn't hypothetical. It plays out every day in hospitals, on battlefields, in bedrooms where insomnia clutches the grieving like a second loss. Soldiers returning from war often report disturbed, sleep-fragmented REM, frequent awakenings, and haunting dreams. Many develop PTSD, but the deeper tragedy may be that their brains never had the chance to process the trauma in the first place. The emotions stayed coupled to the memory. Night after night, the brain tried to make sense of what happened, and night after night, it failed. Caregivers, those who sit vigil beside dying loved ones, suffer silently. Their sleep is constantly interrupted. They wake to administer medicine, to check for breath, to answer late-night calls. They don't get uninterrupted REM, and after the loss, when sleep should bring healing, their exhausted brains struggle to perform the emotional integration that grief demands. The pain stays fresh. The memories feel raw for months, even years. Insomniacs know this too well. Long nights of tossing and turning aren't just tiring, they're emotionally damaging. Without REM sleep, the brain cannot do its quiet, essential task of rebalancing the self. Anxiety builds. Emotional flexibility disappears. Grief hardens into depression. Pain stops flowing and begins to pool, toxic and unmoving. These aren't just anecdotal effects. Studies now show that people who are deprived of REM sleep exhibit signs of emotional rigidity. Their brains react more strongly to negative stimuli. They're more irritable, less compassionate, less resilient. It's as if the emotional brain, having missed its nightly therapy session, starts to malfunction. The pain doesn't pass it, loops. Trauma doesn't fade it, sharpens. And this brings us to a deeper cultural dilemma. We are, by most measures, a sleep-deprived society. Blue-lit screens extend our days and hijack our circadian rhythms. Caffeine fuels us past exhaustion. Stress floods our evenings. We pride ourselves on productivity and undervalue rest. But in doing so, we are neglecting one of the most essential emotional processes the brain performs. We are carrying pain that sleep was designed to release. And over time, that burden changes us. Take the story of a woman who lost her husband. Suddenly, in the weeks after his death, she could barely sleep. She lay in bed for hours, unable to quiet her mind. When she did drift off, she woke within minutes, heart racing, thoughts looping. After 10 days, something changed. She began seeing him in the hallway, in the mirror, in her dreams so vivid they spilled into waking life. But they weren't memories, they were distortions. He spoke in ways he never had, smiled in ways that felt wrong. She was not just grieving, she was hallucinating. Her mind, starved of REM sleep, was unraveling the edges of reality. The memories that should have softened had sharpened into something else frightening, uncanny. This wasn't just sadness, it was neurological disintegration. Her brain was trying to process trauma without its most essential tool, rest. The science is clear and the stakes are high. REM sleep is not a luxury. It is the emotional reset button our brain presses every night. Without it, pain accumulates. Grief becomes stuck. Memories twist into something darker. And we carry emotions the brain was never meant to hold for so long. As the science of sleep advances, so do the questions. And they are not just scientific, they are deeply human. If REM sleep helps us emotionally let go, then why do some dreams haunt us? Why do we wake from sleep, not with relief, but with terror, gasping, sweating, sobbing? If sleep is meant to heal, then what happens when the healing process itself goes awry? The answer lies in the growing complexity of what we're learning. Sleep is not a uniform process. It is layered, fluctuating, precise, and it can be disrupted in subtle ways with significant consequences. Take antidepressants, for instance. Many of the most common medications used to treat depression, anxiety, and PTSD are known to suppress REM sleep. In the short term, this can be helpful. Fewer vivid dreams may mean fewer nightmares, Less REM may mean fewer emotional reactivations in the early, raw stages of trauma, but over time, there's a cost. If REM is the stage where emotional memories are reprocessed, then suppressing it may leave those memories unresolved. Patients often report a numbness, not relief, but an absence, as if the pain is not healed, just paused. The brain is prevented from completing its emotional work, and when they eventually stop the medication, the dreams often return with greater intensity, as if the brain has been saving them up. Layered onto this are the cultural narratives we live inside. We're told to stay strong, to keep it together, to move on. Public grief is uncomfortable. Private suffering is valorized. We reward emotional stoicism and suppress visible sadness. But when these messages combine with a body that is already sleep-deprived, the effect is toxic. The brain is left to carry pain it was biologically designed to release silently and without support. The cultural pressure not to feel among men, caregivers, or those in high-stress professions with chronic sleep disruption, and the result is emotional rigidity, inner numbness, and eventually breakdown. And yet, the biggest paradox remains. If REM is our brain's tool for healing, why do some dreams feel like wounds? Some dreams don't heal, they hurt. They revive old traumas. They play scenes we've buried. They wake us with tears we didn't know we still carried. For those with trauma, dreams can become their own form of suffering. But researchers now believe that this isn't because sleep fails. It's because sleep is trying desperately to complete a process that keeps being interrupted. Traumatized brains often return to the same dream because the emotional loop hasn't closed. The brain is knocking on the same door, night after night, waiting for it to open. This understanding has led to one of the most controversial and fascinating developments in sleep science: targeted memory reactivation, or TMR, in controlled sleep labs. Scientists can now cue specific memories during sleep using sound, scent, or subtle stimuli. A patient might learn a tone paired with a traumatic memory during the day. Then, while sleeping, that same tone is played softly during REM without waking the person. The brain, detecting the cue, may revisit and reprocess the memory. In early studies, this technique appears to accelerate emotional healing. The memory becomes less painful. Sleep does its work strategically enhanced. But this raises profound ethical questions. Should we be editing emotional memories? Is it healing or manipulation? If a memory is altered in sleep, how do we know what was real? What is the line between therapeutic relief and emotional erasure? These are not just modern dilemmas, they echo through history. In ancient Egypt, dreams were sacred. They believed dreams were visitations from the divine messages from gods, ancestors, or the soul itself. Dream interpreters were respected figures, and the act of dreaming was considered a form of spiritual therapy. In temples known as sleep sanctuaries, people came to heal through dreaming. Grief, illness, heartbreak, they believed all could be touched by the wisdom of dreams. And then modernity arrived. Dreams were declared random. Freud tried to reclaim them, but neuroscience dismissed them again. Only now, with the data in hand, are we realizing we may have been wrong. Dreams are not nonsense. They are not noise. They are neurological symphonies, some chaotic, some harmonical, composed by the emotional brain for a reason. They are how we metabolize experience, how we transform chaos into memory, memory into meaning, and meaning into peace. We are at the edge of something ancient and new, a science that dares to ask not just how we sleep, but why we dream, and whether, in the dark, the mind is quietly rescuing us from our pain, our past, and ourselves. And then, the realization hits quietly, almost like a dream itself. Sleep is not simply a biological shutdown, a nightly pause. It is a process far more active, more precise, and more vital than we ever imagined. Sleep is not rest, it is filtration, a hidden emotional alchemy. Every night, beneath the surface of our stillness, the brain begins sorting through the chaos we've lived, through replaying, reshaping, rebalancing, not to erase, but to reduce the burden. It doesn't discard memories. It gently, systematically dims their emotional volume. This is the twist, the thing most people never realize. The brain never deletes, it archives, it softens. That sharp memory of someone shouting in anger. After enough nights of REM, it no longer pierces. It's just a voice, in a moment, part of a broader story. The brain has kept the scene, but dulled its sting. That overwhelming flash of loss, the one that once took your breath away. With sleep, over time, it becomes a chapter, not a loop, not a prison. It finds its place in the narrative of your life, instead of dominating every page. This is how we survive the unbearable, not by forgetting, not by moving on, but by remembering. Differently, sleep grants us this invisible grace. It does not betray our memories. It honors them, just not in their original, unhealed form. The raw wound becomes scar tissue. The sharp moment becomes a shape we can carry. What felt like emotional collapse becomes a part of us, still tender, still real, but no longer dictating who we are in every waking moment. And this is the deeper truth. Letting go has been misunderstood. It doesn't mean casting away or pretending something never happened. It doesn't mean forgetting those we've lost or denying the weight of what we've been through. Letting go means this: allowing the memory to live in us without continuing to harm us. Letting go means giving our brain, through sleep, time and space to rewrite the emotional script. We don't lose our past. We just stop bleeding from it. In a world that often urges us to stay awake, to push through, to ignore our fatigue in the name of productivity or strength, we've forgotten that sleep is not weakness. It is survival. It is self-repair. And in the quiet hours of the night, it is the most powerful tool we have for healing, not because it removes the pain, but because it teaches us how to live with it gently. Today's science has peeled back the mystery of sleep and revealed something essential: REM. Sleep is not optional. It's a biological necessity for emotional survival. Night after night, the brain depends on this sacred window to process what we feel, what we fear, and what we've lost. REM is not a luxury for the well-rested. It is a core mechanism for emotional adaptation. Studies show that individuals who maintain healthy sleep cycles, even during grief or trauma, are significantly more resilient. They don't avoid pain, but they move through it more fluidly. Their memories do not trap them. Their emotional responses remain flexible. They grieve, but they don't fracture. In contrast, the toll of sleep deprivation is now starkly visible. Veterans returning from combat, first responders exposed to repeated trauma, ICU doctors working relentless overnight shifts — these are the individuals whose sleep is chronically disrupted, and many of them struggle to heal, not because they are weak, but because their brains are deprived of the very function designed to help them adapt. Without REM, the brain cannot complete the emotional reprocessing cycle. Pain stays lodged in the nervous system. The past continues to feel present. Emotional injuries remain open. But in response to this growing understanding, new approaches have begun to emerge. Therapists and neuroscientists are developing trauma-informed sleep interventions, recognizing that improving sleep is not just about rest, but about recovery. In PTSD treatment, targeted memory reactivation (TMR) is now being explored not as science fiction, but as a precise therapeutic tool. By subtly cueing certain memories during REM sleep through sound, smell, or subtle stimulation, clinicians can help guide the brain toward resolution without ever waking the patient. Early trials show promise: reduced symptoms, fewer nightmares, more stable emotional regulation. Alongside these breakthroughs, simpler strategies are gaining respect. Blue light blockers, screen hygiene routines, and dream journaling may seem mundane, but they have measurable effects. Reducing artificial light before bed helps preserve the body's natural melatonin rhythm, leading to deeper, more restorative REM cycles. Dream journaling, long dismissed as pseudoscience, is now being re-evaluated. By writing down dreams, individuals can observe recurring emotional themes, many of which parallel real-life healing. In fact, in 2023, a remarkable study brought this idea into sharp focus. Researchers followed a group of grieving parents, mothers, and fathers who had lost a child. Over the course of months, they collected nightly dream reports. The dreams were not random. They followed patterns. Early on, they were filled with confusion, pain, and impossible longing. But as time passed, as sleep was protected and prioritized, those dreams began to change. Symbols emerged, conversations appeared, and, eventually, goodbyes. The researchers found that these changes weren't arbitrary. They correlated strongly with milestones in the parents' waking emotional recovery. The dream world had mirrored on, perhaps facilitated their healing journey. This marks a profound shift in how we see dreams. No longer dismissed as noise, they are beginning to be understood as the emotional language of the brain, not literal messages, but symbolic reflections of psychological movement. Grief speaks in dreams. So does love. So does healing. What we're left with is a deeper respect for sleep, not just as rest, but as therapy, memory, and medicine. The nightly REM cycle is one of the brain's most elegant tools, designed not to erase, but to help us endure. And as we begin to honor that process, protecting sleep, decoding dreams, and designing therapies that align with our biology, we move closer to a kind of healing that doesn't forget, but transforms. In the end, it's not just about sleep. It's about what sleep allows us to do, to live fully, to grieve honestly, and to let go by remembering in a way that no longer breaks us. In a quiet room, dimly lit by the glow of a fading evening, an old man lies asleep. His breathing is steady, his hands gently folded across his chest, and beside him on the nightstand is a worn photograph, faded at the edges, the corners slightly curled. It's of a woman with soft eyes and a laugh that used to fill every room. They entered. She's been gone for years now. Her absence, a constant thread in the fabric of his life. But tonight, in sleep, she returns, not as she was at the end, frail and silent, but as she lived, vibrant, laughing, moving through the dream like light through water. And in the depths of that dream, the old man smiles, not because he's forgotten her, but because remembering her no longer hurts. There is something sacred in that, something wordless. We tend to think of sleep as a retreat from life, a kind of nothingness. But in truth, it's one of the most profound ways that brain participates in life. Each night, as we surrender to it, the mind opens its private workshop. It handles the fragile things we're not ready to face when we're awake. The grief too sharp to hold, the fear too large to name, the love too painful to revisit. It doesn't erase them, it reweaves them into something softer, more livable. Maybe sleep doesn't take our pain away. Maybe it does something more subtle and more humane. Maybe it teaches us how to carry it, not with resistance, but with grace. It teaches us how to hold the memory without being pierced by it, how to remember the sound of someone's voice, the warmth of their hand, the way they once said your name without breaking under the weight of it all. And perhaps, in that quiet transformation, we discover the true meaning of letting go. It's not the forgetting of what mattered. It's the remembering that no longer crushes us. The ability to feel the love without collapsing beneath the loss. To keep the story, even after the person is gone. That's the essence of healing. Not erasure, not numbness, but the slow, cellular ability to remember in a new way. To forget the pain, while remembering the love. In the end, we come to see sleep for what it truly is. Not the absence of feeling, not silence, not void, but the alchemy of healing, a place where the mind, in its deepest wisdom, reshapes what it cannot undo and helps us wake, not whole, but more human.